Hey Access Youth, happy Wednesday. Today I want to ask you a question. Have you ever been invited to a party and you really weren't sure if you wanted to go? Or maybe you heard about a gathering that you really desperately wanted to be part of. You wanted an invite. Well, there's a parable, a story that Jesus tells in Luke chapter 14 that talks about this, that illustrates our idea of an upside down life that we've been talking about. Luke chapter 14, verses 15 through 24, Jesus tells a story that's not true to illustrate a spiritual point. And he tells the story of a master who invites a whole bunch of people to a great banquet. And the people that the master invites, when it comes time for them to come after he's done this lavish amount of preparation, they come up with a whole bunch of lame excuses. The first one says, I need to go check out an ox that I just bought. The second one says, I need to go walk a piece of land that I just bought. I mean, right in the middle of your party. And the third one says, I just got married, so I don't really want to come. And so they give these excuses, and the master, his reaction, he's not sad, he's angry. And he tells the servants, if they don't want to come to my banquet, if they don't want to experience my generosity, then I want you to go out into the town, and I want you to go on the highways and byways, and I want you to find the lame, the blind, the crippled, the outcast, the wanderer. I want you to find anybody you can find to make my banquet full. And now he doesn't do this to punish or spite the people who've said no. He is angry at them, but he does it because he wants people to take advantage of his generosity. He wants to share his lavish feast and preparation with as many people as he can fit around his table. That's the point. And right after this story, he goes on to tell the story that a lot of us are familiar with in Luke chapter 15, the prodigal son, where the son takes his dad's inheritance and he runs off and he spends it all, and he comes crawling back home expecting very little response, really humble. And the dad runs to him and says, all I care is that my son who was dead to me is now alive. And this prodigal, he gets a party. Dad doesn't shake his finger at him. He doesn't say, shame on you. He doesn't say, I'm going to have you do all these things for punishment. He really just says, I love you and I missed you and I'm so glad that you're home and that you're alive. And that expresses, those two stories, they express the heart of God for us. They express to us that he wanted his listeners to understand that their idea of who was accepted in God's kingdom, people who did the right things and said the right things and wore the right things, the people who thought they belonged, that those weren't necessarily the people who said yes to his invitation. And that really his table was big enough for more than just them. It was about reversal. His table was big enough for the poor and the marginalized and the crippled and the lame, and that really he wanted them there because they were willing to say yes. They wanted to be there. They understood the master's generosity. They understood God's lavish love for them. And that's who he wanted at his table. And so his point is that there's room. There's room at the table for you. There's room for people who maybe aren't expected to be there, who don't feel like they belong. But God's love is big enough for them. And he wants them there. And there's a story from a Christian speaker, Tony Campolo, who talks about a time that he visited Honolulu to speak at a conference. And because there was a 6-hour time difference, he found himself awake in the middle of the night, not able to sleep. And so he went out and tried to find a little open coffee shop. And he stumbled into this diner at about 3 a.m., got a cup of coffee and a donut from this big guy behind the counter, found out his name was Harry. And a few minutes into his donut and coffee, he looked around him and realized that what was an empty little diner was now full. And as he started listening to the conversation, he realized it was full of primarily women who had been entertaining male clients that night. It was full of Honolulu's prostitutes. So it was him and Harry and a whole bunch of prostitutes sitting in a diner at 3 a.m. in Honolulu. And he said, before long, I heard this lady who was sitting near me say to her friend, she said, hey, tomorrow is my birthday. I'm going to be 39. And her friend said, what do I care? What do you want me to do about it? You want me to like throw you a party or something? And this woman, she said, hey, I don't need you to be so nasty. I was just telling you. I was just telling someone that tomorrow's my birthday. I don't want you to throw me a party. It's not like anyone has ever thrown me a party ever in my life. Why would I expect you to do that? I just wanted to tell someone. And he said, I heard that conversation and it really struck a chord with me. And so he said, when the ladies left, I turned to Harry and I said, do these ladies come in every night? And he said, yep, every night like clockwork, right about 3:30 a.m. they come in. And he said, and do you know them? Do you know this one who is sitting by me? And he said, oh yeah, that's Agnes. She's really nice. And he said, well, I heard her say that tomorrow's her birthday, and I was wondering if maybe you would want to help me throw a birthday party for her. And he said, Harry got this little smile on his chubby cheeks, and he said, that'd be great, but I got the cake. You do the decorations, I got the cake. So he said, I went and did my thing the next day, and he said about 2:30 a.m. I came back with crepe paper and balloons, and sure enough, Harry had prepared a cake. And he said he'd also told like almost every prostitute in Honolulu that we were having a birthday party for Agnes that night. So he said about 3:15, there we were, me and all the prostitutes in Honolulu and Harry in a diner. And he said the cake was lit with candles, and on the dot at 3:30, Agnes and her friend walked in. And all of us said, surprise! And it was this big thing, and he said Agnes just stared. She just stared at the cake. She didn't say a word. And Harry said really gruffly, blow out the candles, Agnes, blow out the candles. And she blew them out, and everyone applauded. And then she turned to Harry and she said, but I just live a few doors down. Do you think I could take the cake home for just a little bit? I mean, I'm really grateful, but like, do you think I could just keep it for myself for just a little bit? He said, it's your cake, you can do whatever you want. He said, so she picked up that cake, almost like the Holy Grail, and walked out of the diner. She said, I'll be back in a couple minutes. And Tony said this silence kind of fell on this group in this diner. He said, I didn't really know what else to do. So I just said, what do you think if we pray? Should we pray? And he said, everyone bowed their heads, and I led them in prayer. And I prayed for Agnes and her life, and I prayed that she would understand how much God loved her. And he said, I got done, and they started talking again, and Harry said, you never told me you were a preacher. I mean, what kind of church would do something like this? What kind of preacher would do something like this for a prostitute at 3:30 in the morning? And he said, well, my kind of church would. And he said, no, that kind of church doesn't exist, because if it did, I'd go. And here's the thing. That is the kind of God we serve. The God who says, my table is open. There's room for you. It doesn't matter what your past is. It doesn't matter whether you feel qualified or unqualified. It doesn't matter if you think you've done all these things that make you good enough for my kingdom. My love and my grace are available to you. It's an invitation. It's an invitation to relationship with Jesus. He's offering us an invitation to fellowship with him, an invitation to experience his generosity. But we have to say yes. I think it's a party that we want to be part of. But I think that the question you have to ask yourself is, do we really believe that God extends his grace to everyone? Do we really believe his table is big enough that there's room, not just for you, but maybe for that friend that you really think doesn't deserve to be part of God's kingdom, doesn't deserve to be forgiven, doesn't deserve to be loved? Do you believe that maybe you feel like you've made so many mistakes that you don't deserve to be part of God's kingdom, that you don't deserve a seat at the table? But these passages remind us that God is just so happy that we're alive, like the father with the prodigal son. My son who was once dead is now alive. And that my friends, is worthy of a party. That, my friends, is why we celebrate. So here is the last question. Have you said yes to Jesus' invitation? Have you said yes to his upside down way of life, his upside down kingdom that makes room at the table for you?